Welcome to Nocturnal Ledger. There are places on this earth where the veil between the living and the dead is not merely thin but tattered, hanging in shreds like old lace caught on a tombstone. We often look to abandoned asylums or ancient battlefields for these fracture points in reality, believing that stone and mortar hold memory better than the natural world. We are wrong. Nature has a memory far longer and far more unforgiving. Deep within the ancient canal systems of Mexico, south of Mexico City, lies a testament to a haunting that lasted half a century. It is a place that does not require the cover of darkness to be terrifying, for under the bright, blistering sun, its horror is only magnified. This is not a legend born of campfire tales or urban myths. This is a story documented in the cracked minds of witnesses, in the murky waters of Xochimilco, and in the tragic, circular fate of a man named Don Julian Santana Barrera. This is the true, unvarnished history of La Isla de las Muñecas, the island of the dolls. To truly understand the nightmare that manifested on that small chinampa, or artificial island, we must first understand the blood and the water from which it rose. Xochimilco is the last remnant of the vast water transport system built by the Aztecs. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, often called the Venice of Mexico, a place of colorful flat-bottomed boats and mariachi music. But if you steer your vessel away from the tourist-choked main arteries, past the floating gardens and the happy crowds, the silence begins to assert itself. The canals become narrower, the water turns a darker shade of green, thick with lilies and stagnation. The ancient trees, the eyewitness, lean over the water like jagged fingers, trying to touch the surface. It was here, in this isolation, that Julian Santana Barrera chose to live. In the mid-20th century, around 1950, Julian was not yet the mythical figure of horror he would become. He was a man retreating from the world. Locals described him as a loner, a man who felt the weight of society too heavily and sought the solitude of the chinampas to grow vegetables and live in peace. He abandoned his family, his job, and the noise of the city for a hut made of wood and reed on a tiny island surrounded by miles of silent water. But solitude is a dangerous thing when the history of the land is steeped in death. The canals of Xochimilco have swallowed bodies for centuries. From the time of the Aztec sacrifices to modern accidents, the water keeps its secrets until it decides to give them back. The inciting incident, the moment that fractured Julian's reality and birthed the legend, occurred shortly after his arrival. The historical record is a blend of oral tradition and Julian's own feverish testimony. But the core event remains consistent in every account. Julian was on the shore of his island, tending to his crops, when he heard the frantic splashing and screams of a young girl. She had come to the canals to swim with her sisters. Or perhaps she was a local villager who had slipped from the muddy banks. The details of why she was there are less important than the tragedy that followed. Julian ran to the water's edge. He saw her struggling against the undercurrent, the thick tangles of aquatic plants pulling her down like grasping hands. He dove in, desperate to save her. But the water of Xochimilco is deceptive. It is heavy and opaque. By the time he reached the spot where she had gone under, the surface was still. He searched until his lungs burned, diving again and again into the murk. When he finally pulled her body from the reeds, it was too late. The life had gone from her. A young, innocent girl lay dead on the muddy bank of his sanctuary. Julian was devastated. He was a religious man, a man of deep superstition, and the guilt of failing to save this child began to gnaw at the edges of his sanity. He felt he had failed a divine test. He waited for the police, for the family, for the authorities to come and take the body. But even after she was gone, Julian claimed that her presence remained. This is where the psychological horror begins to merge with the paranormal. In the days following the death, Julian began to report phenomena that science cannot easily explain. He spoke of hearing footsteps in the mud outside his hut when no one was there. He described the sound of a child weeping, a soft, sorrowful keen that drifted over the water at night, penetrating the thin walls of his shelter. He felt eyes watching him from the darkness of the trees. The water, once his source of life and isolation, had become a conduit for the dead. He believed the girl's spirit was trapped, angry, and confused, tethered to the place of her drowning and, by extension, to him. Then came the first doll. A few days after the tragedy, Julian saw something floating in the canal, drifting toward his island on the slow current. It was not a branch or a piece of trash, but a doll. It was likely dropped by a tourist or washed out from the city sewers. But to Julian's grief-stricken mind, it was a sign. He fished it out of the water. It was a simple plastic toy, perhaps missing an arm or an eye, waterlogged and dirty. Julian interpreted this object as a message from the beyond, or perhaps a gift sent by the girl herself. In a desperate bid to appease her restless spirit, to show her respect, and to protect himself from her anger, he took the doll and hung it on a tree near the spot where she had died. It was meant to be a singular offering, a memorial, but the activity did not stop. If anything, the atmosphere on the island grew heavier. Julian became convinced that one doll was not enough. The spirit was demanding. She wanted company. She wanted playthings. And so, the obsession began. For the next 50 years, until his death in 2001, Don Julian Santana Barrera dedicated his entire existence to the collection and display of dolls. But these were not pristine figures bought from a store. These were the refuse of the world. Julian would scour the canals, searching the trash heaps and the muddy banks for discarded toys. He would journey into the city, scavenging from dumpsters, trading his homegrown vegetables for broken dolls that people were throwing away. He accepted them in any condition. In fact, the more broken they were, the more they seemed to fit the macabre aesthetic of his mission. He did not clean them. He did not fix them. He hung them exactly as he found them. And this is why the Island of the Dolls is not merely a collection, but a gallery of nightmares. Picture the scene as described by the brave few who visited Julian during his lifetime. The island is small, a patch of earth surrounded by dark water. Every available surface, every tree branch, every fence post, and the walls of the hut itself are covered in dolls. But nature has not been kind to them. The sun has blistered their plastic skin, turning it gray, cracked, and scaly, resembling the flesh of a corpse. The wind and rain have stripped away their hair, leaving them bald and patchy, revealing the skull-like structures underneath. Many of the dolls are missing limbs. You will see a torso hanging by a wire around its neck, legless and armless, swaying in the breeze. You will see disembodied heads impaled on stakes, their eyes bleached white by UV radiation, staring blankly into the jungle. Insects and spiders have made homes inside the hollow cavities of their bodies. Wasps build nests in the open mouths of smiling babies. Worms crawl through empty eye sockets. The dolls are in various stages of decomposition, mirroring the decay of the girl who drowned in the water below. Julian believed that these dolls were not just inanimate objects. He told his nephew, Anastasio, and the few visitors who came, that the dolls were alive. He believed they acted as guardians. He claimed that the spirit of the drowned girl inhabited them, jumping from one plastic shell to another. But it wasn't just her. As the collection grew into the hundreds, and then the thousands, Julian believed that other spirits were drawn to the island, attracted by the energy he was cultivating. He asserted that the dolls would move on their own. Witnesses, people who came to the island as skeptics, have reported chilling phenomena that support Julian's claims. Visitors have described walking past a row of hanging dolls and feeling distinct cold spots in the humid air. Others have sworn that the dolls' eyes follow them. A doll facing north when they arrived would be facing south when they left, with no wind to explain the movement. But the most terrifying reports are auditory. In the dead silence of the Xochimilco canals, where the only sound should be the buzz of cicadas and the lapping of water, people have heard whispering, not the wind through the trees, but distinct, hushed voices. They speak in a language that cannot be understood, a rapid, childish chattering that seems to emanate from the trees themselves. Some have reported hearing the giggle of a little girl, clear as a bell, coming from right behind them. only to turn and find nothing but a eyeless doll swinging gently on a rusty wire. Julian himself became a part of this ecosystem of horror. He changed over the decades. The man who sought peace became a ragged, wild-eyed hermit. He would spend his days talking to the dolls, singing to them, caring for them as if they were his children. He claimed they would tell him things. They would warn him of evil spirits. They would demand more friends. He was a man held hostage by his own creation, a jailer and a prisoner in a prison made of plastic and wire. Paranormal investigators who have ventured to the island, including renowned teams from across the globe, have captured compelling evidence. Electronic voice phenomena, or EVPs, recorded on the island often pick up the sound of a child's voice saying, "Help me," or "Play with me." Electromagnetic field detectors spike wildly near specific clusters of dolls, particularly the ones that Julian identified as his favorites, the leaders of the island. One specific doll, often referred to as Muñecas, was Julian's favorite. He treated it with reverence. He built a small shrine for it. He told visitors that this doll was the primary vessel for the drowned girl. It is a terrifying figure, dark-skinned, with strange, piercing eyes that seem to hold a sentient intelligence. Locals say that if you do not bring an offering to this doll, a coin, a trinket, or a small drop of tequila, you will be cursed. The engine of your boat might fail on the way back. You might fall ill, or the water might try to claim you, just as it claimed the girl. But the most chilling part of this story is not the dolls themselves. It is the end of Don Julian. The conclusion of his life is so perfectly, tragically circular that it defies the logic of the natural world and steps firmly into the realm of the supernatural. For 50 years, Julian served the spirit. He gave up his life to appease her. But as he aged, he began to tell his nephew, Anastasio, that the voices were changing. The dolls were becoming more aggressive. The spirit of the girl was no longer satisfied with the toys. She wanted him. Julian spoke of a mermaid-like figure that would appear to him in the water, a siren that called him to join her in the depths. He told Anastasio that the spirit had told him his time was coming, that he would soon become one of the permanent guardians of the island. On a morning in 2001, Julian was fishing with his nephew in the canal. The day was calm. They were talking, laughing, perhaps enjoying a rare moment of normalcy. Julian began to sing. A song, he said, was to keep the spirits calm. He told Anastasio again about the mermaid, about the voice calling him to the water. Anastasio left briefly to tend to some cattle on the mainland. He was gone for perhaps an hour. When Anastasio returned, the silence of the island was deafening. He called out for his uncle, but there was no answer. He searched the hut. Empty. He searched the garden. Empty. Then, he went to the water's edge. There, floating face down in the canal, was the body of Don Julian Santana Barrera. He was 80 years old. The coroner ruled it a heart failure that caused him to fall into the water and drown. But the physical cause of death is irrelevant compared to the location. Don Julian was found floating in the exact same spot, the precise coordinate in the water, where he had found the body of the little girl 50 years earlier. He had died in the exact manner, and in the exact place, as the spirit he had spent half a century trying to appease. It was as if the debt had finally been called in. The dolls had not been enough. The girl wanted her playmate. After Julian's death, the island fell into the care of Anastasio. Many expected the haunting to cease, believing that the energy was generated by Julian's own psychosis. They were wrong. If anything, the atmosphere on the island intensified. Without Julian there to act as the mediator, the warden of the asylum, the energy became chaotic. Visitors today report an overwhelming sense of oppression the moment they step onto the muddy banks. It is a physical weight, a tightness in the chest. Sensitivity to the environment is not required to feel it. It is a primal reaction. The lizard brain warning you that you are in the presence of a predator. The dolls, now numbering in the thousands, continue to decay. Some have fallen apart completely, leaving only heads or hands nailed to the trees. like trophies of a war against time. Photography on the island is notoriously difficult. Cameras malfunction. Batteries that were fully charged drain to zero in minutes. Images come out distorted or corrupted. There are countless photos taken by tourists that show anomalies. Strange mists hovering over the dolls, shadowy figures standing in the background, or orbs of light floating near the water. Skeptics, of course, have their theories. They argue that Julian was simply a schizophrenic man who created a physical manifestation of his delusions. They say the dolls move because of the wind, or the settling of the soil, or the vibrations of passing boats. They say the whispers are just the acoustics of the canals, carrying sound from distant villages. They argue that his death was a coincidence, a tragic accident of an old man living near dangerous water. But these explanations fail to address the collective experience of thousands of people. They fail to explain why seasoned police officers and hardened locals refuse to go near the island at night. They fail to explain the consistent, specific nature of the phenomena reported by people who have no prior knowledge of the legend. Furthermore, there is the matter of the energy imprint. According to paranormal theory, intense emotions, terror, grief, obsession, can stain a location. Stone, wood, and water can record trauma. Julian pumped 50 years of high-octane fear and worship into that small plot of land. He created a tulpa, a thought form, or he fed an existing entity until it grew strong enough to consume him. The dolls are not just plastic. They are batteries. They are vessels that have absorbed half a century of ritualistic obsession. When you look into the eyes of a doll on the island of the dolls, you are not looking at a toy. You are looking at a mirror, reflecting the fractured mind of a man who looked into the abyss and blinked. You are looking at an object that has been touched, held, and sung to by a man communing with the dead. The island stands today as a grim tourist attraction, but it is not a theme park. There are no ticket booths, no safety rails, no guides to tell you it's all pretend. When you step onto that island, you are stepping into a grave. The locals of Xochimilco will take you there, but many will not step off the boat. They will wait for you on the water, engines idling, ready to leave at a moment's notice. They know the rules. You do not mock the dolls. You do not touch the dolls, and you never, ever take a doll with you. There are stories of tourists who stole small dolls as souvenirs. Within weeks, they returned them, mailing them back to the island, or returning in person, begging for forgiveness. They report a string of bad luck, accidents, nightmares, and a feeling of being suffocated in their sleep. They claim the doll they stole would move around their hotel room or home. The curse, it seems, is portable. The legacy of Don Julian is a testament to the power of belief. Whether the spirit of the girl was real, or whether Julian manifested her through his own guilt, the result is the same. He created a place where the supernatural is the dominant reality. He proved that if you treat an object like it is alive for long enough, if you feed it with attention and fear, it will eventually start to look back at you. As the sun sets over the canals of Xochimilco, the shadows stretch long and thin, connecting the chinampas like a web. The mariachi music fades, the birds go quiet, and on the island of the dolls, thousands of plastic eyes stare out into the darkness, watching, waiting. The wind rustles through the trees, and the dry, clicking sound of plastic limbs hitting together echoes over the water. Is it just the wind? Or is it the sound of 1,000 tiny conversations? Is it the girl and her guardian, finally united, whispering secrets to their army of broken toys? The water of the canal is dark and deep. It holds the memory of the girl. It holds the memory of Julian. And if you lean too close, hoping to see the truth beneath the surface, you might just see a hand reaching up to pull you in. This has been a documented account of the island of the dolls. The records exist. The witnesses are real. The island is waiting. Well, and remember, just because an object is inanimate doesn't mean it's empty. This is Nocturnal Ledger. Good night.